Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee.
Good afternoon. Welcome to In Session. I'm your host, Dr. Farid Holakouee, and I'll be with you for the next 2 hours here on Radio Hamra. Studio number to call in, 310-441-0555. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, so you can call in with any questions related to clinical psychology, including any emotional or psychological issues, parenting issues, and relationship issues as well. You can also follow me on Twitter or Instagram or like my page on Facebook to get updates on the show, or suggest topics or books for the program, and the shows are uploaded at the end of each week to my SoundCloud page and podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Again, our studio number, 310-441-0555. The book of the week for this week is The Black Banners Declassified by Ali Soufan. The Black Banners Declassified: How Torture Derailed the War on Terror After 9/11. And I didn't realize the book was re-released, and I have a newer one where a lot of parts that were redacted by the CIA are now apparently not redacted and are, you can read some parts that are transcripts between interrogators or the members of the intelligence community and terrorists. And Ali Soufan was part of the FBI and outspoken against torture, or what is sometimes called enhanced interrogation techniques, like waterboarding. It's a fairly long book. I'm about 30 pages in, more than 500 to go, so it'll be my friend ringing in the new year. But looking forward to reading that and sharing it with you on Monday's show. And speaking of shows, this is the last show I'll be doing in 2020, December 30th. So next time I'll be on the air with you will be 2021. And it's funny, I wanted to talk about time, and those of you listening to the show live will recognize that we started a few minutes late. So it's kind of funny that I myself was not doing so well with time today. Won't get into the details, but being in the new building here at Radio Hamra, we're having some issues getting some things taken care of and situated before I could get on the air, but thankfully everything's all worked out and resolved for the time being. But I did want to talk about time. So to begin with, one of the questions you're going to hear a lot from people these days, and you'll probably see lots of posts, is what are your New Year's resolutions? And people feel this pressure in a way to have them, and almost we feel a significance, like there's some magical feeling, and there can be this feeling of renewal with any type of significant change like this. New year, new months, even weeks, new, going somewhere new, whatever it might be. We can feel the sense of renewal. Maybe not only just it's a new time, even though really it probably isn't, but new possibilities. And even there's this classic thing you hear people say, new year, new you, which I actually don't like very much, because I think it implies somehow you need to change and be someone completely different. I hope we are always trying to evolve and grow. That's good. But to think you need to be someone else, I think that actually points to some problems. Usually what we recognize is what we want to do is to enhance the parts of ourselves, and even actually what people might not recognize as one of the signs of mental health is internalizing and being more connected to all the aspects of yourself. So I might talk about that a bit too, that I don't like new year, new you. But, New Year's resolutions is an interesting thing for me, because people can emphasize this time to make new goals. But and if you don't have some, people might look at you funny or think, why aren't you planning to do something or having goals to do? But really, what someone could say is, why are you waiting till New Year's to make your goals? There really isn't a significance to it, and we can demystify it in a way, not to mean that we make this less significant, but we recognize the significance of all the other times we have in our lives that we actually can make a change or do something different, whatever that might be. So I do think it's good to, although I'll talk about goals today and some of these same themes that I do every New Year's or around New Year's time, but it's also good to recognize there's no reason why this has to be the time. And related to that, one thing I will say, if you set goals, I'm not against that. I think it's always a good time to set goals. Don't limit yourself just to this time, but it's not a bad time to do so. What's important is, one of the things we notice is people say, well, people break their New Year's resolutions within, you'll see statistics, a week. After so many weeks, this many percentage of people have already broken them. And I think although it can be good to set goals that are challenging and significant and important, that mean a lot to you, and sometimes that means doing something that would be difficult and requires consistency, to be careful not to set goals that are so black and white that they disappear once you don't follow them perfectly. So if you say, every Monday I'm going to do this, or every day I'm going to do this year, what people will often do is, they say, I broke it. Let's say by day 6, they don't do it anymore every day, and they stop doing it altogether. Well, I broke it, it's over. And we all can have this black and white thinking, some of us more strongly than others. And so now we throw it away completely. But this is why I think, rather than just focusing on goals as these floating ideas and ideals, we want to look at the values that are driving the goals and make sure that's important as well, or that's part of what's driving us. Because if we're saying, okay, I want to meditate more, and the way I'm going to measure it is in this way, which can be good, we're saying that meditating more is good, so I want to do that more. So if I stopped doing it for a day or two, it doesn't mean now it's no longer good or significant for me. So that's something that I think is very important to keep in mind when you're setting your goals for yourself, is to not get too caught up in the black and whiteness of achieving the goal. And at times we can use it as an ideal or a destination we'd like to get to, and even if you don't get to it exactly, it can still be good. So if you say, I want to meditate every day, that would be 365 days this year, coming up year. That's great. Now, if you look back on the year and you said, I did it 320 times, I don't think you would say that's really bad. You would still be very happy about that. So you don't want to make the perfect be the enemy of the good, and so that if you don't achieve your goal perfectly, you don't do it at all. We want to be aware of what's guiding us in achieving this goal, and we want to make that be the driving force. And so related to that, what I think is also important is not just to focus on setting goals that are concrete. That's very important, and every year actually I'll talk about SMART goals, and you can look up that acronym of goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, meaning they're challenging but something you can do. Relevant to you means something to you, and time oriented or time specific, so you can measure when you would like to achieve that goal. I think it's very important to set concrete goals, but I also think that this could be a wonderful time to reflect on your time, not just in the sense of how we're aging or what's happening. That can be part of it, but how are you using your time? And 2020, of course, has been this unique year, so much so that you can just say that's so 2020, or of course what you expect is 2020, and it has a meaning to it because of the type of year we've experienced. One of the good things, though, I think that did happen this year is that it forced everyone to pause on a lot of things. Usually not by choice, but a lot of things were put on pause, and many things still are. And what that allowed us to do, or in some ways it did force us, but we had no choice, is to really get a better look at how we spend our time, or if we had a lot of things taken out, what are we going to now do with our time? And I know everyone wanted to learn 3 different languages and get a 6-pack and learn how to bake bread and do all these things, and probably most of us didn't quite meet that goal or that ideal we set for ourselves, but still people were looking at how they're spending their time. One of the things that happened is people who lived with their families, husbands, wives, kids at home, were spending a lot of more time together. And of course, that could lead to more conflict. Anytime you spend more time with anyone, there's more opportunity for conflict. And also, we start to get on each other's nerves a little bit more the more we are around each other. But they also got to enjoy more time together. And so some people are recognizing as we have this rush to get back to normal. Everyone says that, oh, once things get back to normal, or, months ago it was this, 2020, as if when the clock strikes midnight, everything goes back to normal. And now we're kind of seeing that might not be exactly what we're going to get. But people wanted to rush back to normal. And I do think it's a good time to reflect and say, well, what parts of my life were actually abnormal when things were quote unquote normal that I don't want to rush back to? Maybe working 14 hours a day and barely having time to see your kids was way more abnormal than spending time at home with them 24 hours a day. There's maybe something much healthier and normal about that. So along with setting goals, again, I'm not against that. Why not do it now? But I hope you'll keep that as a theme throughout your life of trying to work on things, improve on things, and achieve things in your life. It can be also a good time to think about, how do I spend my life, and not only just look at it going forward, but imagine at the end of 2021, if you were to look back on the year, what is it you think that you would feel good about doing and not doing? I talked about this on Monday's show as I was talking about death. But when we look at our lives, what is it that we'll regret that we didn't do, which is usually what we regret more than what we did do, and make sure our year, and then of course our life, has those things in it. But if we're not intentional and purposeful in how we use our time, what I like to say is not that you're living your life, but your life is happening to you. You go to this thing, to that thing, you rush to that, then there's this, and there's that, and then after you know it, a week is gone, a month is gone, years have gone by, and you look back and you're like, did I really choose what I was doing? And whether or not we consciously do it or intentionally do it with purpose, we in essence are choosing our lives, and we want to make sure we choose wisely, and that often requires pausing, reflecting, also going forward and trying to reflect back to see what kind of life you'd like to live. Now, the bottom line is, will we know? It's an interesting thing to consider. We can say what kind of life you'd like to live, but we don't know. Maybe 20 years from now, you'll regret choosing some of the things you did. I love the quote by Soren Kierkegaard: life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. We can look back and make sense of things and have the wisdom, and we wish if we only knew we could go back, but we can only live our lives going forward, and we have to make some decisions. Sometimes we can project forward and think back. We won't know for sure because our predictions often are wrong, but that's why I think choosing values can be valuable when it comes to this exercise. What are the things I want to have guide my life? What are the important things that I want to be a big part of my life and to matter, that drive me forward? Usually having those values kind of serve as a North Star, a direction to go towards, and your path in that direction might become more clear. But generally, if you choose the right values that align with you and that you feel good about, you'll feel good about the destinations you get to. And as the old adage goes, it's not just about the destination, it's really about the journey. You'll feel good about what you're doing to get there. So we can reflect on our lives at any time, but birthdays, anniversaries, New Year's, these are times that usually put it more in the forefront of our mind, which I think could be a good time to reflect on this year, your life, and also going forward what you want your life to look like. All right, let's go to a commercial break. Studio number 310-441-0555. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Let's go to a caller. Radio Hamra, you're on the air.
Hello?
Yes, hi, you're on the air. Thanks for calling.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, so I would like to talk about photo reading, and it's an actual reading technique, and I would like to know if it's real or false. Does it work or not?
Okay, so yeah, and so I want to be full disclosure to the listeners. I actually didn't know that specific term, and so when we talked maybe for 30 seconds on the commercial break, you mentioned it, and I even Googled it to see what it was. And so, about a minute or two, I was looking at it right now during the commercial break. I was not so familiar with that term. You said photo reading, but speed reading has been around as a technique for a long time, and my own research into looking into speed reading, I read a book recently on how we learn to read that also talked about this a little bit. It tends to show the evidence that it doesn't really improve your reading, or we can say what you gain in speed you lose in comprehension. So it's not necessarily bad in that way, but to think that you're reading just as deeply but much more quickly probably is not the case. So I even looked up a study that was done in 2000 as we're on the commercial break, saying there was not, the claims that are made by photo reading don't seem to be true. And I remember when speed reading, there were some people who were selling different books and CDs, and their claims were proven to not be true either. So that being said, I won't say that there isn't any way of having techniques that improve our ability to read, or that I've found the best way possible. I'm sure there always are ways to improve. I'm always skeptical of anything that's making something way quicker or shorter. Usually when things sound too good to be true, there's a lot of times they are too good to be true. But since you brought it up, you might know, it seems you probably know more about it than me. What are your thoughts on it? What did you hear? And that might let us talk about it a bit more.
Sure. Well, actually, I heard about it about 5 years ago. I was studying in university, and I heard about this technique, and I thought, wow, it could be cool to actually learn tons of information in little time.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through the technique. I actually downloaded the book about it, and the author is a guy called Paul R. Scheele or something in those lines, and he wrote this book, and I just read it, and I thought, okay, this should work. The technique is kind of awkward, so you have to take a book and gaze at the center of the pages,
mm-hmm.
not even at the text, and you have to just turn a page a second. Each second you turn a page, and you would be able to later on activate this. Like, you would be able to recall a quantity of information that you have read mm-hmm. through this so-called technique. And as such, I was kind of not too sure about this, so I just gave up.
Yeah.
And about a year or so, I saw one of my colleagues do this, and I was very astonished as to how does it even work. And I got caught up again trying it, but it still doesn't work for me, so I'm kind of, what do I do? So I thought about asking about you,
sure.
from you,
Yeah, I think what I know about also how we read and the way our eyes work, as much as, I'm right now looking in front of me and things seem like I see a full picture clearly, but really the only part I'm seeing clearly is the in the center of the eye, the fovea, where there's more of the receptors, but other things around it are blurry. So usually if you're reading, even though when you're looking at a page, you can kind of see that there's words on the whole page, your eyes can only see a very small fragment of that. And even some of the reading techniques I saw in that book I mentioned, I think it's called How We Read, something like that I read a couple months ago. It was saying there are these other, there's speed reading, there's people trying to come up with techniques. Well, when we read, our eyes do, like, I think they're called saccades, where it kind of moves, it doesn't move smoothly, it moves in these back and forth kind of almost like twitches in a sense. And how can we limit those? Maybe we could read faster, but it seems that we need those to read in some ways, that it helps us in some ways. So I am skeptical of these types of things where you're going to read a page, and the idea, maybe I'll even talk about it a bit more today, because it relates to something I've been thinking about recently, but that our brains are kind of like these tape recorders. So if you look at the whole page and take it in, You're going to have all that information at your disposal. You just have to access it. And there's a lot of pieces missing there. One is we're not tape recorders that take everything in. You have to really see something to take it in a way. Yes, sometimes there's subliminal things. You could say maybe you didn't really realize you were hearing something or seeing something, but you still were able to take it in. And if your eye couldn't focus on the words, I'm not sure how you would take it in. Now, I don't know what your friend's experience was, but one thing I can also imagine is if someone says, hey, there's this great speed reading technique, and it gets you excited, that person might now read more because they're excited, and so they're turning more pages, and they'll get something. I'm not saying you get nothing. I just think you get considerably less if you're doing, I think you said 1 page a second. It would be very hard for me. Again, I always know that I can't know everything, and that there's ways that people will advance things that won't make sense to me, and then someday will be taken as a given. But to me, it's very hard to comprehend that someone could comprehend a whole page in a second and hold on to it. Will they get a gist of things? Maybe, and that could be enough, and that's good. Maybe if they weren't going to read any books at all, and now they'll speed read or photo read a bunch of books a year and get some information from it. That's not necessarily, that could be very good. But I think something is missed. Even, audiobooks versus reading a book, there's some research, it's not so clear, but there does seem to be some loss in comprehension when we go to audiobook compared to reading a book. People do have different learning styles that might be better and easier for them. My experience is I definitely feel like when I'm holding the book in front of me, I get it a lot better. And there's lots of reasons for that. From the visual is one thing, but also even the ways we can go back is a lot easier. You could go back in an audio, but sometimes I'm reading a book and it says someone's name and I'm like, who was that? And I can go up 2 paragraphs and see, oh yeah, there was that guy or that girl, and then go back. Whereas in an audiobook, it's harder. Usually you don't do it. Also, when you do an audiobook, although you can adjust the speeds now sometimes that the way it comes out, you don't get to read at your pace, essentially. You have to listen at the pace of the person is speaking. That itself has effect. So, but again, if someone said, because of doing audiobooks, I'm now listening to books, 20 extra books a year, yeah, maybe if they read them, they would have gotten more out of them. But the fact that they're just listening to those 20 books can be wonderful and great. And maybe they would have read 0 books and now they're reading 20. So I wouldn't say that's a bad thing, but I still think that there's something that would be lost in the comprehension that has to be taken into account as you're figuring things out. So I don't think photo reading, my initial hunch would be it doesn't work. And
Yes.
It's not something wrong with you. It's something wrong with the claims that are being made. So if you feel like, oh, why can't I get this and my friend got it? My hunch would be you're not going to get, you're not storing. It's like as if it kind of sounds like a Matrix type of a thing, where you're just taking in all this information without having to do the work, which is, I think, a lot of what it would be nice, we could all have a very athletic looking body without exercising or doing 1 minute of exercise a day, know everything, just reading 3 minutes a day. We're looking for these. I actually sometimes have an aversion when I see like life hacks, when people post all these things about hacking things. It is good to find more efficient ways to doing things, of course, and we're always advancing. But a lot of times what I see life hacks, it's really trying to take the easy way out of things, and people are looking for them. So of course it's going to get a lot of attention. You're telling me I could read a book in 10 minutes? Okay, I'll check it out. It's worth a try. It sounds amazing. And so it gets clicks, it gets people buy the books that sell. It's funny, I wonder if you photo read the photo reading book, will you still be able to photo read? I don't know. That would be an interesting kind of meta study that we can do on that topic. But I think we have to be very wary of that. And even going back to my previous segment about time, it's an interesting thing. Of course, we get finite time, and it makes sense. One of the hardest things in life, I think, is balancing everything we want to do. We have so many things we want to do, but we have limited time. And so how do we make that work? So it could be understandable that we're looking for shortcuts, but we have to be very wary, I think, and skeptical, at least going in of that.
Yes. I have another question.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks. It's about Memory Palace. Does that work? Or is it, again, something to be skeptical of?
Yeah, so thankfully I won't sound like such a Debbie Downer and such a skeptic. But by Memory Palace, I'm assuming you mean the process of trying to remember things by the method of loci, I guess it could be also called.
Yes.
And I forgot, is it Cicero? I forgot who is said to have come up with the memory palace. But basically, the story goes that there was this like a Greek, I think it was Greek. It was either Greek or Roman. Yeah. Maybe you know the story better, but and the building collapsed. There was like a wedding party, and they're trying to figure out who was there that I think died in the wreckage. And this individual was able to, walk through the place essentially in their head and remember who was sitting where, and then, recreate that. And so it became this mnemonic device or memory technique where you could then remember things by, using a location you're familiar with and putting the objects. And now sometimes that takes another type of mnemonic device to get yourself to do that. I couldn't remember the word mnemonic. That's kind of ironic. So using those mnemonic devices to help you, I actually... I have to be frank with the listeners. I read this book a couple of years ago called, I think, Moonwalking with Einstein, where the individual trained to be in these memory Olympics. And one of the main ways they did things was using these types of, memory palace, or you find your own location. And I was trying to learn how to memorize a deck of cards in any random order using the techniques they had. And I got okay at it. I think I got to not under 5 minutes, definitely not. I think I got close to 8-9 minutes where I could look at the deck of cards and then not look at it and then go and tell you the order of the 52 cards in a row using that memory palace technique, where you imagine different images along this path, and then they become clear to you. And then that helps you remember things in a particular order. So, and even I think people that memorize pi to 1,000 digits, they very often use things like the memory palace to do that. So I know I started going off on it a lot, but what were your own thoughts or questions about that?
Well, my question is, I've actually tried it, and I actually wanted to apply it to studying. But I've got a hard time to apply it to text, because it's like law and it has tons of text, and you can't really just. For me, it's pretty hard to put it in an image way. So I would like to know how do you do it? Which location did you take?
Yeah. Well, as the locations go, of course, everyone picks one they're familiar with. So, for example, I would think of my house, and I imagine first parking my car in the garage, and then the door next to the elevator, then in the elevator. I picked these different, I think I had 17, 18 different spots. So this place has to be, of course, somewhere where you know very well. And I do think certain types of information lends itself better than others to these types of techniques. So I know people who train in these memory Olympics, they say that you can do it for almost any kind of information, but I could see how law might be harder. Now, maybe, I don't know if are you studying for the bar, or what is this for, or in law school? No,
this is actually for real estate. And
okay.
In my country, we have tons of law.
I see. Yeah. But that often is the case. Yeah, there's lots of laws you're going to have to learn for those things. Sometimes they might be able to, different elements, like let's say, your front door is the laws for whatever, one aspect of it for escrow or something, and you could have a way of putting them there in some visual way that makes sense for you. But it can be, I think, a lot harder for certain types of information. The deck of cards is very easy because you, for example, will say, I even remember, I think the 10 of hearts for me was Leo Messi, my favorite soccer player, who wears number 10, and the heart was because I like him a lot, or you can say love him. And so that was my way of remembering that was him. And so part of what you would do is imagine him. It's complicated, but there's 3 parts to every image you have for every card, and you combine them. But anyway, so you have these visual images that make it a lot easier to remember, like a deck of cards. It might be harder to make that same connection, to use that memory palace. There are different techniques that might benefit you, different mnemonic devices, because really when we look at memory, we say, well, how many things can you remember? If I ask you how many letters you can memorize in a row, if they are random letters, you could probably do somewhere between 5 to 9, maybe 10, if you don't have a lot of time. But if you know all the lyrics to a song, essentially that might be thousands of letters in a row that you would be able to say because they have meaning. So because we can break it up into chunks that have meaning, or one big chunk, that's how our memory can make sense of something and remember things easier. Or when we look at a chessboard, I sometimes like watching people who play chess. I'm not very good myself, but I'll even watch videos online. Amateur chess player versus a very skilled chess player, they did some studies and they found that when it came to a chessboard that was meaningful, meaning that it could be a real game, the masters were way better at remembering than the novices or people that don't play. But if it was something that was very haphazard and really wasn't relevant to actual chess playing, the way the pieces were arranged, then I don't know if they were not much better or weren't even better than average people, because now the pieces really didn't have meaning in the way that they make sense of it. So when we try to learn something or memorize something, making meaning of it is very important in helping us remember things. So you can see how you can make them memorable. Repetition is very important. I read a book a while ago. It's funny because we've talked about reading and it has a meta feeling. I think it was called How We Learn, and it had some good techniques. Maybe it was like Benedict Carey, something like that. That was the author's name. It had some good techniques, and you can look up some things that'll teach you, for example, how to space out your studying. You want to not just study one thing for, like, let's say a week and then go to the next thing. The more you mix it up, the better. It makes you feel uncomfortable because when we stay within one realm of information, it's easier on us. But that discomfort is actually going to help you learn. And a bunch of other techniques that you might want to try. I can see how the memory palace might be harder for something like the law. You can find online, maybe someone has some ways that will kind of make it translate better for that. But, I would say look up some things, and at the end of the day, it's going to take a lot of time no matter how you do it. You can find some ways to make it better and easier, but I'm sure it's going to take you a lot of time, and it's going to take everyone a lot of time. So if someone tells you I learned that all in 2 minutes and it's taking you 2 months, they're probably not giving you the full story. So hopefully be easier on yourself in that sense, and good luck with that test.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Yeah.
This was so mind-opening. Thank you.
Oh, you're so kind. It was so nice talking to you. Thank you for your questions. Have a great day. Happy 2021.
You too.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, let's go to another commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Studio number 310-441-0555. Let's go to another caller. Radio Hamra, you're on the air.
Hello, yes.
Hi, thanks for calling.
Thank you. Doctor, I have a question. It's about my family.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a divorced father. I have 2 kids, 18 and 15. And my divorce was 10 years ago, and then I moved from the state that my family were to another state, and then after a few years. And since then, my kids were living with their mother. Their mother, she's an American.
Mm-hmm.
And in all these years, I have had connect with my kids, going there, visiting them, not as much as needed. And now I want to know, I know they got some damage because of the divorce and because I wasn't there for them all these. And I need to know now what can I do for them now that she is 15 and my son is 18. Mm-hmm. What can I do for them to do something about the damage that they got, and they help them to have a better future? Because now my son, he's 18, but he's like a 13-year-old boy. He doesn't have that many friends. Most of the time, he likes to be inside the house playing games, not be outside. My daughter, and in school, he's not good unless I put pressure on him.
Mm-hmm.
And he does something. And my daughter, she's good at school, but this year she has problem because of everything is online right now. She has some problem with her classes, and she failed some of them, and she says she cannot concentrate. I want to know, as a father, what can I do to to, I don't know, do something for them, help them.
Sure. I mean, even in your voice, I feel a pain about that, and the pain might be part worry, part maybe some guilt or not a good feeling about, like when you talk about this damage that is done. And so I definitely want to give you what I hope will be some more practical advice, but also what I think is important in almost anything we do is looking at our mindset. Well, tell me how, I'm not sure if I heard how you're doing right now, but what are you feeling right now talking about this?
Exactly like what you said, is partial of it is guilt. And the rest of it is worry about it.
Sure. And of course, they're very intertwined, those two feelings, because, you have a guilt of what has happened and your contribution to what's happened and potentially hurting your kids, or the damage, as you put it. And then you're worried of what that becomes. And the bigger that becomes, you might feel like your guilt will grow of, well, look what I did, or look how I hurt them. And of course, that makes you want to stop it, which is a good intention, obviously, to want to help your kids, love your kids. If there's any damage, repair it. But the reason why the mindset can be important is that if we focus so much, or if the guilt is driving our actions too strongly, then the motivation can become more about your guilty feeling, even without you realizing it, rather than your kids being okay. So the way I see this play out with families a lot of times, whether it's with divorce or whatever it is, just parents in general, they see their kid going through something that might have been caused from what they've done. And that makes them feel so guilty that, of course, they want things to be better, but they can do it in a way that puts a pressure on the child. You need to be better because you not being okay makes me not feel okay. It makes me feel guilty. And so because of that, even parents will respond with anger. Oh, okay, well, you're still depressed, whatever. It's your fault. You want to be depressed, or you want to do this, or you're doing this to yourself, because we can't handle and tolerate the guilt we're feeling. So we have to find some way of getting rid of it. And oftentimes either it's pressure put on them, or the blame put on them, or some kind of judgment on them. So you need to be mindful of your guilt and how much it's fueling what you do with them in multiple ways, including from what I shared, and also trying to do too much too fast. So you're trying to make up for it. So, you see, okay, I hurt them. Let's say you did something 20 different times and you want to fix it all at once. And that feeling itself usually doesn't let the healing happen and might even open up some new wounds. So I've shared some thoughts, and I have obviously some more to share, but I want to hear what you already think from what I've said so far.
That's exactly. I was, and I wanted to do too many things, and the reason I call that because I don't know if I'm doing something wrong or right, or if it's enough or not, and I wanted an expert, somebody like you, tell me what's the best thing I can do, because I have heard when Dr. Holakouee Senior, they were saying for example, kids when before they are 18, you can do something as a parent for them, but when they are 18 or past, it's done. You cannot do anything for them as a parent. But like I said, my son is 18 and he acts like he's 12, 13 years old boy. His personality is like that.
Yeah.
And my daughter's 15, so.
So, and let me say a few things. Actually, you mentioned that he's still 12 or 13. Of course, there could be some things specifically about him that makes him that way. Also, when kids go through traumas or pain, or any of us, we can sometimes stay stuck in a certain age, a type of arrested development. So it could be that he stayed stuck in that age that you're describing, and you can look at that. Is there something there? Or it could be just his personality or aspects of him as well. Now, going back to what you're saying about, well, up to a certain age you can have an impact. Yes, of course, the type of impact, the amount of impact we can have on our children will change over time in multiple ways. When they're babies 0 to 1, there's some things that you can never change again in some ways, but you can still work on things after the fact. And I work with families where people in their 50s are apologizing for things that happened maybe 10 years ago or 40 years ago, and it has a big impact. So I don't want you to think, well, things are done and damaged beyond belief. Has the time passed? Your child is now 18. We can't go back to when he was 17 and do something, but we can do a lot now still. And of course, that's where you want your focus to lie, with what is still in your hands, which is the present and going forward. And there's a whole lot you very likely can do. So I don't want you to think that you've missed your opportunity completely. The window is closed. You almost need to give up. Not at all. There's so much I'm sure that you can do. And your kids, until you're hopefully live a long time and be with them for a long time, you always can have an impact in their life as a relationship. Yes, when they're 40 it'll be different than right now, but still, you as their father will always have that possibility to be the best father you can be to them. And that's where we want your focus to lie, is how can I help these things with them. And the reason why I mentioned about trying to do too much too quickly is what parents also do in a similar vein is they do a blanket apology. Not just parents, people will do that. You know what, I did so many things wrong in the divorce, so many things, so I'm sorry. And then in a way we think that's going to give us blanket immunity for everything that happened in a period of time, which might have been hundreds or thousands of different type of instances. And it doesn't mean necessarily we have to go into each single one of them, but especially some major ones, it very well will be important to go into them in detail. And the reason why we like the blanket apologies, it's quicker and faster, relates to what I was talking about with the previous caller, a type of life hack, so to speak. But also, we don't want to face the individual one. So if you just say, I'm so sorry, I did so many things wrong, I'm sorry for those things. That is hard, and that would be very valuable still, but it's going to be a lot harder to be, I'm sorry for that day when I did this thing. And then you're going to have to face it more clearly, face their pain more clearly, and that's going to be a much harder conversation to handle and tolerate, but a much more meaningful one when it comes to healing the past. We can never change the past, but we can definitely have a big impact on healing the past, especially the most rapid way, the most efficient way. I know I was just talking about life hacks, so it might sound like I'm contradicting myself, but in a genuine way. The fastest way to heal a pain, an emotional pain, is for the person that hurt us, to apologize to us. So when I'm in therapy, I have people coming in and we're working on the pains from the past, but I do know that if whoever had hurt them would apologize for the ways they got hurt, that would lead much more quickly to healing those wounds than any work I can do with them. And now that opportunity isn't always available to people for multiple reasons. The person might be dead, which makes it in that way impossible, or the person won't do it and might even make it worse if you go talk to them, so you might need to deal with it on their own. But in this case, you're the one with this great power, but really responsibility, that you can help heal these wounds that you may in some level have contributed to. I don't want to say blame completely on you. Usually things are complicated, but you probably contributed to in some significant degree. So you have to be ready to have the conversations, and only if and when they want to have them too, of addressing these things. Because another aspect of being fueled by the guilt is you might force the conversations when your kids don't want to have them, and that would be about you, not about them. So it's only if and when they want to have these types of talks would you have those talks with them. But we do have to be ready to talk about some things that I would imagine you don't want to talk about. It would make sense that it's going to be painful, and that's why it'll be good for you to first come to terms. It doesn't mean your emotions are going to go away, but that you don't go into the conversation too animated, in the sense that your feelings might become the biggest part of the conversation, not what your children are feeling, which is really where the focus should lie.
Mm. In few conversations I had with them, I maybe I will try to explain why I left them, and because it was a reason. My action was giving them this hope that I'm going to go back and live with their mom and being together. And they were, for a few years when they were younger, they did push a different way. Even until the last year, they were telling me, "Hey, Dad, you can come here in this estate and stay with us, and you can start over here again and all this. And I said, no, I can't. I'm much older now, and it's not easy to start from zero again, and I cannot move back there. Even until a year ago, they were talking like this, and they were hoping that I can go back there. Right now, my daughter moved here. She's living with me. My son, he's still with his mom, and is living with his mom. And right now, I'm just confused. I don't know where to start. And
yeah.
what
Well,
to do.
we can, we're at a commercial break, and I do want to continue the conversation on the other side of the break. We will definitely talk about it, but one thing we'll also realize is we'll come up with some ideas, some things to think about, and even some techniques to a degree. But a big part of what's going to happen, or what will be the best path, your children are going to be the guides when it comes to this healing, meaning that it's not just you're going to dictate how it goes, because what they want, what they need, what they're ready to deal with at any given time, that's something only they can tell you too. So a big part of it will be you taking their lead to a degree, but showing an openness to do so, and an openness to have the conversations that might be needed. So let's go to a commercial break, and we'll talk some more afterwards, okay?
Sure. Thank you.
We'll be right back. Welcome back. Before the break, we're with the caller. Let's go back to him now. Caller, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so before the break, you were sharing about current situation you're in. I believe your children are 15 and 18. Divorce was 2 years ago, and you're...
No.
Oh.
Divorce was... We separated 10 years ago, and divorce was 3 years after.
Okay, well, maybe I missed... Wait, 3 years ago, and then... So 6 years ago you separated, or I'm not sure if I got that.
Oh, no. We separated 10 years ago, and then when my kids were 5 and 8, and then we divorced 3 years after that. I mean, we divorced 7 years ago.
Oh, okay.
And then I moved out. Then, 7 years ago, I moved out.
I see. Okay, that actually, yeah. I'm glad we clarified that. I must have misheard you the first time around when you were giving the dates and things. Okay, so it's been a longer type of separation, or at least the divorce has been longer. I meant separation between you and the kids is longer, and so these feelings might be older as well. And also with your son saying you feel like he's kind of stuck in a younger age. Again, it could just be how he is, and we don't want to make seem that he has to change, but there could be some level of him staying a little bit stuck to some degree. Okay, so that gives me a better idea.
I'm sorry.
No?
When we were separated, I was seeing my kids almost every week. But since I moved out from the state, then I couldn't see them as often before.
Okay.
And
So, I did ask you this in a way, but if, what is it that because you mentioned the guilt is there. What do you feel guilty about?
because they had problems. Their mom had some problem, and most of the guilt is why I wasn't there when they went through all those problems in their life, and I wasn't there to help them out.
Okay. Obviously, only whatever you want to share. But what were those? What kind of problems are we talking about?
One of the major ones was their mother had a drinking problem, and later on added some anxiety problems and stuff like that. But she quit almost 3 years ago. She quit, and 2 or 3 years ago she quit, and she doesn't have that problem, and she doesn't have a drinking problem anymore. But she has that anxiety problem.
Okay. And so, and it was that related to the separation and divorce also? Any of these factors?
Yes.
Okay.
She started. She started after the separation. Yes, she had that problem before, but we were together. It was like a controllable. We were she wasn't doing it, getting drunk and stuff like that. No, she was drinking, but she wasn't getting drunk like that. But since we separated and then divorced, it got worse and worse.
I see. Okay. And it's, it's complicated, these things, because, you leave a marriage if it's not working, but then you're saying you feel bad leaving your kids in that situation, and maybe it got worse, and it's hard to say, well, did it get worse because you were no longer there? Not necessarily, but, what's the alternative? That you would have just stayed even if things were really not working? That could have been bad in its own way. So, these things are complicated, but we don't want to focus so much just on making a case. I don't want you to feel so guilty, but I do want you to be aware that when you talk to your kids, we initially want to start from a place of apology or being sorry rather than setting up our case. Eventually you'll get to that point, and because we want them to understand why you did what you did. But any apology that starts with, I'm sorry I did this, but this is exactly why actually what I did was not wrong, won't feel like much of an apology. Taking another step back, before we can even have these kinds of conversations, what has to be there, or what's important to look at, is the relationship you have with your kids. Because we can only have as intimate of a conversation as the relationship itself can handle, meaning how close you feel with one another. So let's say this is not your case, but if someone told me they haven't been in their child's life since they were a baby, and now they've shown up and they want to have some super deep conversation, the relationship might not be able to withstand that, and so we have to be aware of that. So how do you feel about your relationship, your closeness with the two of them? I think you said your daughter is now living with you?
Yes.
Okay. So what are those relationships like?
It is so good, actually. During the last 7 years, for example, whenever I go there to visit them, and we had some argue, me and their mom, and in those arguments, they were taking my side, and even I do have a real good relationship with my kids. I can say they love me.
Okay.
And then it's a good relationship.
Okay. I'm glad they love you, and I know things are not ideal always, but that they're taking your side in fights is not it doesn't sound so good that they'd have to do that, but I guess they're going to have a feeling about the fights you and their mom have. So you're seeing that at least they're at some level sympathetic to your side, which it's hard to give a full judgment on what that would mean, but you feel like there's something there. So along with the apologies, or really in a way part of the apology, is to continue strengthening your relationship. Going back to your earlier question, or really in some ways motivation for the call, was how do I make things better with my kids or minimize the damage? The overall thing we're trying to do is create a better relationship, or the best relationship with them that you can. And that involves being close to them, as close as they want, of course, being there for them, spending time with them in ways they want. All those kinds of things will also be very important. So going back to this, if the guilt is driving us, we might too quickly try to have the conversations because we can't handle it when the kids are not ready or the relationship is not ready, and we have to be mindful of that as well.
And what can I do for my son? Because, like I said, my daughter, she's 15. She has a goal for her future, what she wants to do, it's all this stuff. But my son, I can say, he doesn't have any goal. He just likes to stay home all day, every day, play games, and that's it. And like I said, he doesn't have too many friends. I can say he may have one close friend. And
Okay.
Rest of his friends are the people online that he's playing games with them.
Mm-hmm.
But the person who go to his house, or he comes to his house and play game, it's only one person, not more than that. How can I help him to motivate him to have a goal for his future, do something about it?
Yeah, well, again, not to sound like a broken record, because I was just talking about this, rather than just looking at it as how do I get him to X, the thing you can do, or the only way you're going to help him anyways, through your relationship with him. So even if we look at advice, for example, when people think, well, I want to give good advice to my son or my daughter, what's even more important than the advice you give is the relationship you have with them. Because if you don't have that, where they feel connected to you, they feel like you understand them, and they feel like they can trust you, it doesn't matter what advice you give. Even right now, you called me. I'm very grateful and honored for that. But at some level, you're going to value what I have to say. If you were just walking down the street and some, guy came up to you and said, do this and this and this with your kids, you'd be like, you wouldn't even listen to them. Even it could be good advice, but you wouldn't hear it because you don't have that trust in them and that relationship with them. So in wanting to guide him, again, rather than focusing on how do I get him to where I need him to go, it's going to be first through your relationship with him to connect. And then there might be space for advice or seeing. First of all, you even want to see, how is he? Maybe he's okay. You might have some assumptions of what his life should look like that he might not want. Socially, social life is very important, but really how we measure anything is the person experiencing it. If he actually likes it genuinely, then it could be okay. If he's not happy with it, then let's see how, if he needs any support from you, you could do that. But again, the first place you're going to help him the most is by your relationship with him, which then will open up more avenues for you to help him if that is possible.
And is it right that they are separated now? And my daughter is with me, and my son is with his mother. Is it the right thing that we did because my daughter wanted to come here stay with me because of the problems she had with her mom?
Well, I don't. Off the bat, it doesn't sound ideal, but we can't force something to happen. So it's not that, okay, well, that doesn't sound right. Now you immediately send her back to her mom's house, or you make her brother live with you. But I think it's worth resolving it, and this might even be some entryway of creating more closeness of co-parenting with their mom and figuring out what to do and what's best for them. We want to give her that space that she can come to you, but we also don't want it to be like, well, if you're having problems with someone, you just leave and go away from it, especially someone like her mom, who likely she'll want to have a relationship with continuing. So as much as it might feel nice for you, understandably, that she's coming to you and you can have that, we do want to evaluate, okay, what's the best thing for her, what makes the most sense, and likely that's going to be a collaborative effort between you, definitely her, your daughter, and her mom, of figuring out what's the best thing we can do. So I would look at that very closely.
If she, for example, if she say, okay, I want to stay with you for the rest of my teenager years,
Mm-hmm.
is it okay if I say yes, you can stay with me, or I have to guide it the way that she goes back, because she's a girl, she goes back and stay with her mom? Which one's better?
Yeah, so I would definitely give her the feeling, and not just give it to her because it's not true, but that you're there for her so she can stay with you as long as she wants. But that you also want to look at, well, what's going on between her and her mom, and I want us to see that. So it's not an either or of, okay, yeah, you're just going to stay and that's it, or no, that's it, you have to leave the house tomorrow. But let's look at what's happening that you don't want to live with her anymore, because that's going to be, to me, even more important than just what's the exact right thing to do now. Because I think the lesson we want to teach her is that we don't leave. Now, actually, as I'm saying it, there's interesting that they might feel like you left in some way when the going got tough, and that's not necessarily what happened, but there could be some even modeling of that. Well, I can't handle mom anymore, so I just move away, and that's how I dealing with her.
The main thing that she said, my mom, when I did ask her that question, and she said because she was mad and pissed all the time, yelling and getting argue, not physically, just verbally.
Yeah.
So we were getting a fight and argue all the time. She was mad and pissed all the time. That's why she said I wasn't feeling comfortable being there. That's why I wanted to come here and live with you. That's
Yeah.
what she said.
Well, yeah, and I would definitely, you have to obviously keep a balance because you want to co-parent at some point too. So you don't want to throw her mom completely under the bus, but you definitely want to empathize with her. Yeah, I could see how that was upsetting or that was really hard, and that you didn't want to be there.
That's exactly what I told her.
Great.
That the reason your mom is acting like this is because of anxiety problem that she has, because too much pressure on her. I mean, having 2 kids, living by herself, all these. These are the reasons she was acting like that. It's not that she doesn't love you or she does it on purpose. Because of all these reasons, that's why she's acting like that. That's the way I explain it to her.
Yeah, which gives her some perspective of her mom's side, and the other side is making sure you empathize with her. That I could see how this was. That is hard for you, and it's been tough, and you don't know how to deal with it, and even with the pandemic, I don't know when it happened, but you've been spending more time together. That can make it harder, or having more opportunities to argue and all of that. It's not to push her or pressure her, but you can ask her though, long term, or what does she want? And we get that she's really hurt by her mom, or maybe she doesn't even know if she can be close to her mom. We're not going to force her to be close to anyone, but it could be something to explore with her. What does she want to do? So like I said, I wouldn't just focus on does she have to move back or stay with you, but really looking at this bigger picture of her relationship with her mom and what she wants to do with that. Because them being apart, I have some concerns. They're older now, but even still, and most importantly is how they feel about it. Even how does your son feel about it? Of course, if your son says, no, I want my sister living with me, that doesn't mean he can dictate where she lives, but it is something worth talking about as a family, if that's something that can be done. These conversations are tough, but I think they're important to have. How long has she been living with you?
Almost 7 months.
7 months. Okay. So, I mean, a little bit into the pandemic, it seems like. So which was
No,
the time?
they had this problem before
Sure.
pandemic.
Yeah, I'm sure things were there. It maybe just came to a head with even more, lots of, the pandemic put a magnifying glass on a lot of issues, both individually and interpersonally, in our relationships. So maybe this added, there's too much of that closeness and too much of, they didn't have space from each other. And so she wanted a lot of space, living in a different place. So I think it's worth looking at and talking with her where long-term, what does she think with her mom? And she might still be inside. I don't know where she's at, but as far as mentally, she might say, I don't want to talk to her ever again, or I don't want to live with her ever again, or I don't, whatever it might be. But we can have that conversation. What is their relationship like right now?
Right now, they talk over the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Almost every other day, she calls her or she calls my daughter, and they talk. Sometimes they can argue for some reason when they're talking about some example for when they're talking about the school. They can argue again, but it's much better than when she was living. Because I believe before it was all the time, was every single day there was arguing about something. But right now, most of the time they're just talking over the phone. They're talking so nice to each other, talk about different things, and often sometimes they can argue about something that they're not agree about it.
Well, I mean, having space, they maybe living together might be too hard for them, or there's ways they'd have to figure that out. So I'm not saying that's the only option that's there, but this is creating a very big opportunity for co-parenting for you and their mom to work together on this. And so I wouldn't put the pressure solely on you to make this decision, because it's not really just yours to make. Most importantly, it's your daughter who was choosing where to live. But you and her mother, I think, should be trying to figure this out with her, not in a kind of we're going to trick her or figure out what's best for her and then make her do that, but that you can work together on this. And as I was saying before, one thing you have to be aware of is, yes, she came to you, which is great, but your own feelings might want you to want this closeness and want to take it without looking at the bigger picture of what's the best for her long term. And I'm not saying that's what you're, yeah.
Sadly, their mom doesn't do this. She doesn't work with me
Yeah.
about anything. She points finger at me all the time for all the problems that she had in her life, before, after divorce, all these. And even in front of the kids, always she's talking negative about me, even to the kids. So it is not going to work. I did try too many times.
Okay.
It didn't work. She doesn't work with me. When I say something, she said, no, you don't understand what you're talking about. You don't know. You haven't been here. You haven't go through everything that I went. So you don't know what you're talking about. You were single, having your good life. I was going through all these problems all these years, and she's pointing finger at me all the time.
Well, I mean, I obviously you're the one that is dealing with her and knows what she's like, but in having a co-parenting conversation, it hopefully doesn't come into finger pointing because you don't even tell her what she should do and she's not telling you what you should do, but you talk about it together. And so even if she told you that, easier said than done, and I know you have your own feelings, but you're right, you were with the kids more than I was. You are right about that. I'm trying to figure out how can we together do what's best for our kids because we love them. It's not just about what I've done to you and what I've even done to them in the past. I want to know what can we do for them now. And I'm not saying I know for sure you can have a conversation like that with her or you can do something, but we need to keep trying because that's the only thing we can do is to co-parent. You are essentially co-parenting. It's just how much you're communicating and connecting and working together. And we want to try to make that as much as we can, a stronger relationship because, again, for the kids. So she'll point the finger. She says, it's all your fault, actually. Even whatever she's going through, it's all you. She's not even mad at me. She's mad at you. Okay. She might throw that at you. And all of it is not on you. Some of it is. I'm sure it is. Even some of the anger they give to her might be from you. That's possible. But again, your focus is how do we do what's best for them now? And hopefully...
I believe I've done some stuff wrong. I believe I'm guilty about some stuff. But I told her, I said, I believe all this. I know what I did or I did. Maybe I don't know what I did wrong, but I'm sure I did too many things wrong. I'm guilty about too many things. But the point is, like you said, I told her we talk about the kids, what we can do for them, but she doesn't want to listen.
Yeah, well, it seems like either she doesn't want to go there, or she's too angry to go there, or So I don't know how to deal with that, her anger, to then get to the work that you need to be done for the kids. I would hope you keep trying, obviously, for the kids and even for yourself, because if you get to a better place with that, you'll feel better too. But ultimately, for the kids, there has to be some level of working together. There. Yeah. I do have some other callers on hold and we're at a commercial break. So maybe we'll wrap it up here for now. I'm sure there's a lot for you to think about, but would be happy to talk to you again in the future.
Sure. Thank you, Doctor.
Nice talking to you. Take care.
Have a great day.
Yeah, bye-bye. All right. We'll go to another commercial break. We'll be right back. Back. Studio number 310-441-0555. Let's go to another caller. Radio Hamra, you're on the air.
Hi, Doctor. As we previously talked during the commercial break, I was telling you that I have made some drastic changes in my life habits within the past year, which were positive. But it was good for a while, but recently it has taken me back to that feeling of being uneasy and uncomfortable in my own skin, as I had that before. And even though I've made those changes and they've been very challenging, but still I have that feeling of anxiety, being not enough, and just being uncomfortable in my own skin. So that's why I called and I wanted to talk to you about it.
Yeah. And, we're talking in a way about New Year's goals, and, sometimes it's like some surfacey type of things that might be meaningful, but you're talking about something much, much deeper, how you feel about yourself, as you said, feeling comfortable in your own skin. And when we don't feel that, the anxiety and uneasiness that comes with that, which can be really debilitating in a lot of different ways. One thing I'll mention before we get into it is that those types of progress in those kinds of domains, although we'll talk about them as being long lasting, it doesn't mean that, let's say, once you feel more comfortable in your own skin, you'll never feel uncomfortable again, or you'll never revert back to that. In some ways, it's like if you're trying to change your posture, how you walk, with some conscious effort, you might get yourself to walk more upright and straight and good, and you feel better about it. But when you get tired or stressed or you don't pay attention, unconsciously you might go back to that old way of walking again, and you'll have to remind yourself. So it's not exactly the same, but there's a similar theme where because you likely have felt this way a lot of your life, there will still be a tendency, even if you feel like you've overcome it, to go back there at some times. Now, if you go back there less, and if you go back there less severely, that's still huge progress. It doesn't mean you didn't make any progress this year or recently in that domain, but it's just something to be aware of, because how we measure our progress is very important. If we measure how much energy we have, we say I shouldn't sleep anymore, you're going to feel like you're doing a really bad job, and maybe you need to sleep every night. So those are just some thoughts I wanted to add before we get a little bit more deep into it. Can you tell me more what you mean feeling comfortable in your skin? What did you do that you think helped? Yeah.
Sure. So maybe I should just give you like a little bit of a background of where I come from and how everything started. So I'm 34 years old. And I grew up in Iran, and I moved here a few years back, and I moved here for my education, and I graduated, I started working, and the problem started, like, I mean, my background in Iran is not, let's not how to put it. Well, my dad had an alcohol issue, and he died of the disease of alcoholism, and up until I moved here, I never drank, never, because of the experiences and all the heavy lift that his drinking had on our life. But then, and I didn't drink while I was in school. I graduated, took in my class, everything great. I got a job I wanted, and then the job started, and when the job started, I had some tension in the job, and it was stressful. It was not the perfect, ideal environment that I had thought of. And then with that, for stress relief, I started drinking here and there. And that drinking progressed pretty quick into becoming binge drinking, drinking a lot, more than enough, and that kind of took a toll on my life and started hurting me in every aspect of my life. So, but the amount of time that I was drinking was not that long, so it wasn't like, it was maybe a year and a half. But I right away I knew that there's a problem. So last year what I started is just I changed my lifestyle completely. I stopped drinking it overall. I started getting more into spirituality and self-awareness techniques and, meditating and all of those tools. I started using those more often. And I did make drastic changes in my eating habits, my lifestyle. But then what happened is that I still have that weird, really bad feeling that I get a lot of the time, is that feeling of not being enough, not being easy, not being happy within my own skin. So, and I think about it, and I come to this conclusion that, first place, I started drinking because of this feeling. And now that I've overcome that obstacle of not drinking and all the problems in my life, and I have everything that I always wanted, how come I'm still having that same feeling again? Yeah.
And are you still using alcohol in that same way?
No, I stopped drinking completely.
Okay. So, I hope you recognize, again, what I was talking about, progress maybe we don't see it as strongly as it is, but that's still a huge gain. Now, I don't know how you're coping with things now, or if you're using other, sometimes people might find even a worse type of addiction, or at least something different, but that is still a lot of progress that you're making. And you're right, it's an interesting cycle. Even with addiction in general, we'll feel a feeling of shame or feeling down, and we might drink or whatever we use to cope with it as in our addictive cycle. And that'll actually make us feel worse. And then so the cycle continues because now we feel worse. And our easiest way of dealing with really intense bad feelings, or even good feelings sometimes, but especially the bad ones, is to turn to that thing again. And so it creates this really nasty cycle. Now, thankfully, you did some very hard work in breaking that cycle so that you don't go to alcohol to deal with that. But still, when you have these feelings, you get surprised they come up. It's going to be hard to deal with them. And first and foremost, I would hope you give yourself compassion that you still have these feelings come up, more than any kind of judgment of why do I still feel this way? I've overcome this. What's wrong with me? Or I should have, been over this by now, or it doesn't make sense. The truth is it never made sense. Even before you've done all the things you've done to work on yourself, you are still worthy of love, and you are still worthy of feeling good in your own skin and lovable, and all those good things. You already deserved them before you made any of those changes. So it never actually made sense. And that's why even making these changes doesn't necessarily mean that feeling goes away, because it wasn't a logical type of feeling. It wasn't based on just logic or, this is what I deserve or don't deserve. It was a feeling. And that's what also makes it so hard to change, because it's deeply in you and it comes up in a way that just feels like something is a truth or a reality when it isn't based on that. So I talked a bunch, and we're about to get to a commercial break. I do want to hear some of your thoughts, and what we'll likely do is talk after the break as well. But what do you think about some of the things I brought up so far?
I do agree with you that this feeling of like having compassion for yourself. I'm very hard on myself, always have been like that. And when I think about my life and what I've been through, I think being hard on myself in some aspects have been useful to my life, because I learned survival skills, and coming from the childhood and the family that I come from, if I didn't learn those survival skills, I wouldn't be where I am here today, in terms of where I stand in society and the person that I am in terms of education, work, and all of that. But then comes along not giving myself enough maybe credit at times.
Yeah.
Being too hard on myself, that also comes with it. Yeah.
Right.
So
And
I understand what you're saying.
yeah, and this is what all of us are dealing with is we're brought up in a certain environment, and we find a strategy to survive that environment. Hopefully it's more safe and secure where it doesn't feel like survival, but a lot of times it's survival, like you said. And that might serve us well then, but then we're no longer in that environment, but we still use that strategy. It's as if we're in a war, so you're used to carrying your gun and being on alert. Now the war is over and you're still carrying that gun because it's felt like that's the only way I survive, that's the only way I can live. And so it's possible that having some of that toughness, that harshness might have helped you then, but it more than likely is only going to be hurting you now. And even when it comes to pushing ourselves, doing good things, sometimes we think we can only do that if we're hard on ourselves. We have to give that only tough love, that almost, it could be judgmental type of what feels like love. But we actually can push ourselves even harder. We can do better when we come from a compassionate approach. And compassion doesn't mean no matter what you do, it's good. There's nothing wrong with anything. You won't judge it, but it doesn't mean you see everything as equal. You actually will see, because I love myself, I want good for myself. I want to take care of myself. I want to do these good things, right? Not because I don't want to be a loser or bad or unlovable, but it's because I love myself and I want even better. So the way I make this distinction is, in one instance, we're running away from a nightmare. In another instance, we're running towards a dream. Running away from a nightmare means I don't want to be a loser or unlovable or all these bad things, and that's always going to be stressful and never really feel good. But if you love yourself and you're going towards your dreams, that can feel quite good. You feel good as it's happening, and you feel good about where you're going, and it can feel very different. Even though on the outside we might see two people working hard, what's driving them might be very different. So let's go to a commercial break, but we'll talk for a few minutes after that, okay?
Okay, great.
All right, thank you. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Before the break, we're with the caller. Let's go back to her now. Caller, are you still there?
Yes, I'm
All
here.
right. So, you were talking about the growth you've made in this year, but at times seeing that you feel like you go back to your old ways and you, in a way, get surprised by that. And we did touch on a bunch of different topics, from tough love to compassion, and how loving yourself might seem like at times not the way to keep progressing, but I would advocate for that actually loving yourself and being compassionate could actually help you get to where you want to get to. And first of all, realize where you are right now is already good and good enough to be loved. You mentioned about your father and him being, having alcoholism. And so, of course, we know there's a big genetic component to addiction, and especially when it comes to alcohol. I was actually messaged during the break by someone saying it's something like 40 to 60%, but don't quote me on that. That's kind of taken from their quote of that statistic. What also can, and of course there's the modeling, all of that plays a big part. What I can imagine happened in your case as well is you probably saw that part of him and didn't like it, and especially to see some of that in yourself must have been difficult.
I literally, within the time that I was drinking, I became the same thing that I despised of my father. The same thing that I always said, I preached about how destructive it was. I came my father within a less amount of time. That for him it progressed within years. For me, I think it was progressing pretty much faster. So it was kind of like your worst nightmare coming through. And that's what happened to me. And I would think I would be surprised in how I could despise something, and then I would be doing the same thing over and over again.
And that's not a good feeling, but one that we often experience in life, in the sense that not necessarily exactly what you said, but that we don't want to do something, or we tell ourselves something's not good and we keep doing it because usually we have an issue or issues or specific things we deal with, and those are usually the things we battle a lot of our life. Someone who's anxious might get anxious a lot, someone who has anger issues, and so here for you, not only were you facing your worst nightmare, you were facing the worst monster in your life and seeing yourself, what you felt like was becoming that monster, even though it doesn't necessarily mean that was what was happening. And in some ways we can see this as an expression of our shadow. So we all have parts of ourselves, or very often, especially if we have certain experiences in childhood of what we see in our parents and what we experience in our lives, that we put away and we don't want to ever see. So there are probably parts of your father that you do have, being his daughter, that you never wanted to get in touch with, but that were there. And so when they started coming out, you might have felt like that means I am him, or as bad as him, or whatever those judgments were. And especially if you weren't fully in terms, which I'm sure it was hard to be with everything you're describing with him, when that was coming out, I'm sure it was very, very challenging for you to see that now you are this thing you didn't want to be. But I hope you can see that that pattern is so common. People have an abusive parent, not to justify them being abusive to their kids at all, but we do see that unfortunately abuse does beget abuse, or aggression does make people more likely to be aggressive, even if they personally experience how painful it was to be the recipient of it. So another aspect of that compassion is realizing not that you should do it or we want you to do it, but we can understand it,
Exactly. So I saw, because I was the eldest, and I saw how it hurt our family. Till to this day, we're still suffering from the effects of his drinking. And what amazed me was how I was going down the same pattern, everything similar, exactly what he did. I was going down the same line, even though I saw within my own eyes, I remember since I was like around 4 years old, how his patterns and behavior was ruining our family and hurting us as kids, ruining my mother as a wife, as a woman, and the toll it put on her. And that, mind you, we grew up in Iran, the burden that it put on our family. And what I was struggling to understand with my own behavior was, how come I saw all of those and I'm still going down the same line as he did?
Yeah, and part of it is that first part of that sentence, because you saw all those things, it can make it more likely they happen. We would think I saw how bad it was, so I would never do it. But in some ways, whatever is more familiar even if it was familiar in a painful way, we're more likely to go towards it. So you have the genetic part also, which is huge, and I do want you to recognize that. Doesn't mean you're destined to it, and anyone is destined, but it can play a big part in that. But the fact that you saw it, it's just like how people get attracted to people who have the negative qualities of their parents. And it could seem so strange, but there's something familiar and something that feels like home and something that feels that that's where the love is. Even if the love was also laced with a lot of pain, and even it could be abuse, if that's where we received our love and safety, even if it didn't feel so safe, but it was safer than being outside of that home, well, it could make sense that something about that will still be drawn towards it. Or you never really could resolve his drinking. Maybe there's something that you wanted to resolve it through yourself in some unconscious ways as well. So there are many factors that can push us in the direction of destructive behaviors, and especially the ones that we've already seen the type of destruction they can cause and even felt that pain. And that could be very surprising, but it does seem to be this peculiar thing that we see time and time again in people's lives. So I don't want you to go through that again, but when you tell me you've gone through it, I'm not so surprised. That it can be understandable that even though you saw how bad it is too up close, you still got yourself in that situation.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. So coming back to this, what do you think you did? You mentioned some things about being more on a spiritual journey, taking care of yourself, but what have you done, or what do you think you did recently that really and I guess stopping the drinking was a big part of that as well. But what do you think you did that helped and worked for you?
In my case, I went deep into my background without even try to put denial aside.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to not lie to myself and be as realistic as I could with my past and my life and my life choices and my decisions. And when I was true to myself, I realized which parts of my life I've neglected. What I did for my health, well, for my well-being, was just studying, going to school, working hard, getting the outside pretty, so that I didn't work on my soul. I didn't work on my well-being mentally. So that soul inside me was crying for help, and I didn't pay attention to it. I thought by looking healthy, meaning looking good in society, when you get the attention, you look healthy and you're doing good. But I was deep inside, I was suffering. And that's what I was not paying attention to, and I think I let go of that because I got too caught up in getting other aspects of my life getting done, and just because migrating to a new country, all those other issues that I went through. So there were other stuff that came before me thinking about my mental health. And what I did, I set a specific time in my life every day to go back and work on and being honestly stop lying to myself. I was lying to myself a lot.
And sometimes we think we're going to go in a cocoon and fix everything and then come out and do everything, and usually we have to do both at the same time. So we work on ourselves internally, but also we can start doing more loving things towards ourselves, taking care of ourselves if we can get that to happen. And that could also make us feel loved too, and both can work in a parallel process together and strengthen each other. If you had to look at, you're saying I was lying to myself, was there a theme or a certain lie that you realized you were telling yourself?
It's really easy to throw a pity party for yourself, and that's what I was doing. Just poor you, your dad was like this, poor you went through this in your life, poor you did that, instead of being honest with myself and knowing the negatives of what I've been through and the positives that were there to allow me to be where I am today. Just being true to what I've been through, I think, helped me a lot, instead of just feeling sorry for myself and just coming up with reasons on why I'm doing something destructive to my life.
Interesting. Yeah, this you said pity party, and there's a distinction that it can be a thin line at times of where is genuine compassion and giving ourselves understanding, and where is there pity. And it's not always so clear, because when we're feeling hurt, we do need some time to deal with that pain and feel it and give ourselves empathy and compassion and recover from it. But we don't want to just stay in that pain either. And it's not a set thing that we can say it takes 3 weeks or 1 month, or because there's so many different factors of how much the pain is, where you are in your life, how much support you have, all those things. But at some point, we do want to try our best to see if we can see our pain and say, okay, I'm not responsible for what happened to me, but I am responsible for what I do going forward and what I do with the pain that I've even been given. Easier said than done. It doesn't mean we'll just go in a straight path towards progress, but there is some level where we want to take that responsibility for our own lives because we're the only ones who are responsible for them. But it's sometimes not clear because we can still get into that judgment space of, well, it doesn't matter if this happened, it shouldn't affect you. And it's not always so clear. So it could be, as I said, a thin line, and one that won't be always obvious which one we're doing, because we might judge ourselves. Let's say, someone was abused by their parent and now they have a limp. They were physically abused. For them to be upset with themselves the rest of their life that they limp would really be unfair. The limp might be there. Now, maybe they can still be physically active and find ways to do that, strengthen themselves. That would be good. And so emotionally, we can sometimes have the same type of a thing. We may be wounded in ways, I talked about this Monday. Not necessarily everything that doesn't kill us makes us stronger. Some things do leave wounds that do have effects, and sometimes we overcome them and become stronger, but sometimes they can impact us in a negative way that might last. And so it's finding that balance of giving ourselves the compassion and love that we still did go through that. It doesn't mean we're a victim in the sense that we have to stay small or weak or wounded and can't move forward, but that we might still have those scars and they might pop up here and there. And hopefully we can still have that love and compassion for ourselves if and when they do. And I hope you can hold on to that as well, that you're not necessarily throwing yourself a pity party if you recognize that there's still some effects there.
Yeah, your talks made me realize, like, one of the things, like, exactly as I did for my growth was I realized I've never dealt with my dad's disease and death. So one of the things I did, I sat down and I came in terms and I forgave my parents for all their mistakes. I had I had resentments towards my mother, towards my dad, and those were unsolved. And what I did was I would brush them away all the time, all my life, because other things came along in life and they were more important to me at the time. So I brushed them away and I never came in terms with my parents. And the resentment that I had towards both my parents, I think that played a huge role in me getting into the destructive pattern, and also coming in terms with them kind of helped me a lot too.
And there's, I have a lot of thoughts on that, and I feel like I'm now brushing away when you're bringing up these really important feelings, but we are at the end of the show. But there was a lot there that you talked about that in and of itself could be the topic of shows, of forgiving our parents and how to do that, and the complications that can come up with that, and when's the right time, and there's a lot there. But I do wish you the best on that journey that you're on, and I hope you are loving to yourself on the path and enjoy the journey and also the destinations you get to. But thank you for your call. Wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye. All right, that brings us to the end of the show. A big thank you to Ghazala here in the studio as always, and a happy new year to everyone. Look forward to seeing you and being with you early in 2021. You've been listening to In Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee. Have a wonderful day.